Right now, on a patio in St. Louis, there's an apple tree 4 feet wide growing in a plastic pot. It's producing full-sized apples, the same size you'd get from a tree with 40 feet to stretch out in the ground. That's not a gimmick, that's what happens once you stop believing fruit trees need a yard. Here's what nobody tells you before you buy one. Most container fruit tree advice online comes from people trying to sell you the tree, not people trying to save you 3 wasted years. They leave out 2 or 3 details. Details that decide whether you're eating fruit next summer or staring at a healthy, leafy, completely fruitless tree, wondering what went wrong. Today, 19 fruit trees that don't just survive in a container, they thrive in one. Number 1 can put cash back in your pocket every season. Number 9 is the mistake almost everyone makes with one of the most popular trees on this list, and it has nothing to do with sun, water, or soil. If you want to grow real food in a small space, patio, balcony, back step, whatever you've got, this channel is for you. Let's get into it. At 19 we have blueberries. You've seen the little clamshells at the store, $4-5, and half of them are already going soft. Here's what nobody tells you when they sell you that first blueberry bush. The reason most potted blueberries sulk for years and never fruit isn't sunlight, it's pH. Blueberries need soil between 4.5 and 5.5, way more acidic than standard potting mix, which runs alkaline. You can't just scoop them into a bag from the hardware store and expect fruit. Use a blend built for acid lovers, azalea or rhododendron mix or peat moss cut with shredded pine bark. And make sure the container drains well, because regular potting soil is too alkaline for blueberry roots to function. Trap number 2, the tag says self-pollinating and stops there. True, but pair it with a second compatible variety and you'll get a noticeably bigger, more reliable harvest than one lonely bush on its own. Start young plants small, move up to a 16 to 20-inch pot or a half barrel as they mature, give them 6 to 8 hours of direct sun. Get the acidity right, and one pot on a sunny patio replaces a summer of $5 clamshells, for the cost of a bag of pine bark and a jug of soil acidifier. At 18, Mayor lemon. Grocery store lemons are bred for shelf life, not flavor. Thick-skinned, sour, picked weeks too early. Mayor lemons are the opposite. Sweeter, thinner-skinned, the variety chefs actually want. And one of the easiest citrus trees to keep alive in a pot for years. Here's the trap almost every tag skips. It says self-pollinating, and technically it is. Each flower has both male and female parts, so one tree can set fruit alone. But there's fine print. It still needs air movement or insects to spread that pollen between flowers. Leave it indoors too long and fruit set drops off fast. That's why so many people end up with a gorgeous, fragrant, blooming lemon tree and no lemons. The fix: run a small paintbrush over each open flower yourself, especially in winter when the tree's parked by a window instead of outside with the bees. Size-wise, this is genuinely patio-friendly. In a container, Mayor lemons typically stay 3 to 4 feet tall. Start small, size up gradually, and use a well-draining citrus or cactus mix, not standard potting soil. Soggy roots kill this tree fast. Water deep, then let it dry out before watering again. The seasonal rhythm matters. Outside for summer, full sun, fed monthly. Container citrus need feeding more often than in-ground trees since nutrients wash out of a pot fast. Once temperatures drop, bring it in near your sunniest window before the first real chill hits and taper off feeding for winter. Here's the payoff: this isn't a wait 5 years and maybe tree. Most start producing within 3 to 5 years, and one mature tree in an 18 to 24-inch pot can hand you dozens of lemons a season, the kind you'd pay a premium for one at a time at a specialty grocer. At 17, Chicago hardy fig. Fresh figs at a grocery store are a luxury item, a tiny clamshell of 6, priced like they're rare. They kind of are. Figs bruise and spoil within days of picking, so most stores barely bother. Which is exactly why this tree belongs on the list. Growing your own isn't just cheaper, it's the only realistic way to eat one truly fresh. Here's the trap: people in colder climates assume fig trees are strictly warm zone and cross them off the list. Outdated. Chicago hardy survives zone 5 winters and bears sweet, rich figs from July through frost. And it pulls this off in almost the opposite way you'd expect. It fruits on current season growth. Even if the branches die back completely over winter, the tree regrows and fruits again on fresh wood the same year. A cold snap that would end most fruit trees' season barely slows this one down. Pollination's a non-issue too. Chicago hardy is self-pollinating, one tree, no second variety, no hand-pollinating, no guesswork. For sizing, don't undersell the container. Use a pot at least 20 to 24 inches wide with good drainage. Figs push a surprisingly large root system for a patio plant. Full sun, proper drainage hole, and feed it 3 or 4 times a year with a slow-release fertilizer since nutrients wash out every time you water. Winter care is where this tree earns its name twice over. In a genuinely cold zone, move the pot into an unheated garage or shed that protects the branches and can even trigger earlier fruiting on old wood the following year. A trick in-ground growers in the same climate simply don't get. The payoff is real. One first-year container tree in Zone 5 hit 8 feet by October and produced 47 figs in its debut season. Priced at grocery store rates, that's a genuinely embarrassing amount of money for a handful of clamshells. At 16 Fuyu persimmon. Persimmons barely exist in most people's grocery rotation. When they do show up, they're expensive, oddly shaped, and half the staff can't tell you if they're ripe. That confusion is the opportunity because Fuyu solves the one thing that scares people off persimmons entirely. Most people know persimmons as the fruit that turns your mouth inside out if you eat it before it's mush soft. True for some varieties, not this one. Fuyu is firm and ready to eat, even slightly underripe, crisp, sweet, closer to an apple or pear than the syrupy, must-be mushy persimmons people picture. That's the one trait that earned this variety the spot over its relatives. It removes the guesswork that keeps most people away. Here's the trap, and it's about sizing, not growing. Every tag says compact. What it doesn't say clearly, in the ground, Fuyu reaches 15 to 20 feet tall and wide at maturity. That's not a patio tree by nature, it's a patio tree by management. A pot restricts the roots and keeps it dramatically smaller, but that means real pruning discipline, not just picking a dwarf label off a tag and walking away. Choose a large pot, 18 to 24 inches, to give the roots room and site it somewhere sheltered. Persimmons don't love heavy wind. Water deep and slow, then let the soil dry out before watering again. Pollination's simple. Fuyu is self-pollinating. One tree, no second variety, no hand-pollinating routine. You will wait, though, 3 to 4 years before it starts bearing. Not the entry for someone chasing fruit by next summer. It's the one you plant now, so in 3 years, while everyone else is still buying the confusing, overpriced ones at the store, you're stepping outside in October to a tree hung with fruit that looks like little orange ornaments and tastes better than anything you've bought. At 15 Goji berry. You've seen goji berries at a health food store, small bag, eye-watering price, sitting next to the $30 superfood powders. What most people don't realize, the plant behind those dried berries is one of the toughest, most container-friendly shrubs on this whole list. Here's what sellers rarely explain. Goji isn't really a tree, it's a vining, suckering shrub that wants to sprawl. Left alone, it needs containment, a root barrier, real spacing, or a proper pot. A pot isn't the compromise here, it's the upgrade. It naturally limits the aggressive root spread that makes goji a problem in open ground. Trap number 2 trips up anyone who's grown blueberries or other acid lovers, because goji goes the opposite direction. Instead of acidic soil, blend in lime to push the pH towards 6.8 to 7. Goji is one of the most alkaline-tolerant berry crops you can grow. Treat it like a typical acid lover and you'll stunt it. Don't undersell the pot. A 15 to 25 gallon container with good drainage fully contains the roots and suits a patio comfortably. Size up gradually over several years rather than jumping straight to something huge. Give it full sun, 6 to 8 hours minimum, and a trellis or stake, since goji canes want something to lean on. Pollination's a non-issue. Goji is self-fertile, one plant full crop, a second plant just stretches your harvest window. The payoff builds fast. Expect a light first crop in year 2, half a pound to a pound, full production by year 3, and 4 to 8 pounds a season from established plants after that. Compare that to health food store prices, and one pot on a sunny patio pays for its own soil, container, and plant within the first real harvest. Everything after that is free superfood. At 14 Little avocado. If you eat avocados regularly, you know the sting. $2-3 each, and half of them are either rock hard or bruised before you even slice one. This entry quietly attacks that habit directly, and it's the one people are most surprised even exists as a patio tree. Here's the trap. Most people hear avocado tree and picture the towering 40-foot beast growing over some orchard in California. True for a standard tree, not this one. The little cado, also sold as wurtz, is a true dwarf, 10 to 15 feet at most, and pruning keeps it far smaller than that. Genuinely patio scaled, not dwarf in name only. Trap number 2 quietly ruins people's harvests. The tag usually just says self-pollinating and stops there. Dwarf cultivars like wurtz and gwen do set fruit alone, but fruit set is stronger with a compatible pollinator nearby or when pollinators can reach the flowers. Growing it indoors or somewhere bees can't get to the blossoms. Hand pollinate during bloom or you'll end up with a gorgeous flowering tree and a disappointing trickle of fruit. Don't start big. Move up gradually 1 or 2 pot sizes at a time until you land around a 15-gallon, 18-inch pot at maturity, though some growers push to 20 gallons for long-term stability. Use loose, well-draining soil like sandy loam. Avocado roots grow fast and hate sitting wet. Full sun, sheltered from harsh wind, especially while young. The wait is shorter than people expect. Forget the old advice about avocados taking a decade. That's seed-grown trees. A grafted dwarf can start bearing in as little as 2 to 3 years. That's a real foreseeable payoff, not a someday maybe promise. And once it's established, one productive little cotto turns a $2 or $3 grocery habit into something you're pulling off your own patio all season. Creamy, tree-ripened, never bruised in transit. At 13, raspberry shortcake. You know the drill, that plastic clamshell of raspberries, $4 or $5, and half of them are already weeping juice by the time you get it home. Raspberries might be the worst fruit to buy pre-picked. They're at their best for maybe a day after ripening. A grocery store can't deliver that. Here's the trap that trips up first-timers. Not every raspberry plant belongs in a pot. Wild-type raspberries spread aggressively through underground suckers and want to sprawl across a yard, a nightmare in a container. Raspberry shortcake was bred specifically as a compact thornless bush. And thornless matters more than it sounds. It's the difference between 5 pleasant minutes of picking and bleeding for your berries. Sizing is where people sabotage themselves. Use a container at least 24 inches wide. Undersized pots don't just limit growth, they reduce cold hardiness too, since exposed roots in a small pot are far more vulnerable to a cold snap than roots buried in open ground. The plant itself stays compact, 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, so despite the big pot it won't take over your patio. Here's the part that quietly decides your whole harvest. Pick your variety based on when you actually want fruit. Some raspberries only fruit once on second-year canes. Everbearing types fruit on new growth the very first year. Buy the wrong type expecting berries by fall and you might wait an entire extra season without realizing why. Everbearing primicane varieties are the easier call for containers anyway. Cut all the canes down each winter and still get a fall crop. No juggling old and new canes in a cramped pot. Full sun, slightly acidic soil around pH 6.5 and consistent moisture. Shallow raspberry roots dry out fast in a container. The payoff is modest per plant but adds up. A well-grown container plant delivers several pints over a season, picked at peak ripeness, eaten within minutes, for the cost of one plant instead of a summer of $5 clamshells. At 12, dwarf everbearing mulberry. This is the status tree on the list, the one that gives you something your neighbors genuinely can't buy anywhere at any price. You won't find mulberries in the supermarket because they're too delicate and short-lived to survive shipping. This isn't a fruit that's expensive at the store, it's a fruit that isn't at the store, period. The only way most people will ever taste one is if someone grows it. Here's what the tag rarely tells you: this isn't a one-and-done harvest like most fruit trees. It's an extended ever-bearing harvest running May through summer. The tree carries green, ripening, and fully ripe berries all at once for most of the season. Instead of one 2-week window, you're picking in waves for months. Trap to know before you buy: don't confuse this with a full-sized mulberry, which becomes a genuinely enormous shade tree. Standard mulberries can grow over 30 feet. The dwarf variety reaches only 6 to 10 feet, and with pruning right after each fruiting flush, container growers commonly keep it at 2 to 6 feet, which also triggers a fresh round of blooms and extends the harvest even further. Pollination's a non-issue for an interesting reason. It carries both male and female flowers on the same plant, and it's pollinated by wind, not insects. No external pollen source needed at all. One plant, self-contained. For the pot, size matters less than drainage. A 15 to 20 gallon container with good drainage holes, loamy soil, full sun. It's also genuinely forgiving, one of the few fruit trees that actually tolerates heavy clay well. If past container mixes have felt fussy, this is the low-drama entry on the list. The timeline is short too, bearing meaningfully in 2 to 3 years, sometimes a light crop in year 1. And once it's established, there's no grocery store price to compare it to. There isn't one. Most people go their entire lives never tasting a fresh mulberry. You're stepping out to your patio and picking a bowl of them off your own tree. At 11, dwarf nana pomegranate. Here's a plot twist: this one isn't really about groceries. Regular pomegranates run $3-4 each at the store, but that's not why it's here. It's here because it's one of the few genuinely ornamental fruit trees on this list. It does double duty as decor and food. The trap here is expectations, not technique. Nurseries photograph Nana next to full-sized pomegranates and let you assume you're getting the same fruit, just smaller. You're not. Yes, it's edible, but the fruits are small, about 2 inches, and less sweet than a full-size pomegranate. Some growers treat it as purely decorative rather than a serious food crop. That's the honest framing, gorgeous flowers, a genuine harvest, but not a pomegranate juice every week kind of tree. Here's what almost nobody explains about getting it to actually flower and fruit. It won't bloom without real sun, and counterintuitively, it blooms best when slightly pot-bound. Don't rush to upsize the container. When you do repot, move up only 1 to 2 inches, not into something dramatically bigger. That's the opposite of the usual container instinct, where bigger pot, happier plant is the default. Here, a little root confinement works in your favor. Pollination has a real asterisk. Some pomegranate types are self-pollinating, some aren't. Outdoor plants get help from wind or insects, but an indoor plant needs you to move pollen between flowers with a small paintbrush. Skip that step indoors and you'll get striking orange-red blooms and zero fruit, the single most common disappointment with this plant. Size-wise, this is one of the most compact trees on the entire list. Nana grows just 2 to 4 feet tall and wide, genuinely windowsill viable, not just patio viable. It's also low-fuss otherwise, drought-tolerant, pest-resistant, happy in full sun to partial shade. The payoff here isn't a pantry full of juice. It's a small tree dense with bright flowers and jewel-toned fruit hanging on for months, doing something almost nothing else on this list does, looking like a showpiece and feeding you at the same time. A 10 Owari Satsuma Mandarin. This is the citrus for people who tried growing citrus once in a cold climate and quit. Every store-bought mandarin has a story you never think about: shipped green, gassed to color, picked long before peak sweetness. This one flips that entirely, and it's built specifically to survive winters that kill most other citrus outright. Here's the myth this entry kills: that citrus only belongs in Florida or California backyards. Owari Satsuma is prized for its cold hardiness, often called the most cold-tolerant citrus available to home gardeners, tolerating temperatures down to roughly 15 degrees F once established. That's not a typical citrus stat. It's why growers in zones 4 through 7, genuinely cold winter regions, can grow this in a container, bringing it indoors only during the harshest stretch of winter instead of babying it year-round like most citrus demands. Trap worth knowing: the tag says seedless, and mostly it's true, but there's a catch. A citrus fruit with 3 or fewer seeds still counts as commercially seedless, and this variety may develop a few seeds if it cross-pollinates with other citrus nearby. Growing multiple citrus varieties on the same patio, don't be surprised by the occasional seed. Nothing went wrong. Sizing is genuinely patio-friendly. In a pot, Owari Satsuma stays smaller than its in-ground potential, typically 6 to 10 feet. A starter tree only needs a 10 to 14-inch pot, roughly 3 to 5 gallons, and you size up as it grows. Pollination's another non-issue: self-fertile, 1 tree, full harvest. Harvest timing is where this tree quietly wins. It ripens October through December, right when most fresh fruit has vanished for the year, and right when grocery store citrus prices tend to climb. While everyone else pays holiday markup for bagged mandarins, you're peeling one straight off your own patio tree, seedless, sweet, picked at the exact moment it was ready. Something no shipped fruit can ever fully claim. 9 Dwarf apple, and the mistake almost everyone makes. This is the one I teased at the start, and it's not really about the apple, it's about a pattern you've been absorbing this whole list without realizing it. Blueberries, self-fertile; figs, self-pollinating; Mayer lemon, mulberry, persimmon, satsuma, all one-tree trees. So when someone buys their first dwarf apple, they bring the same assumption. That assumption is almost always wrong. Apples are, for the most part, self-unfruitful. Pollen from another flower on the same tree, even from another tree of the same variety, won't pollinate the blossoms. Every apple tree needs cross-pollination from a different variety or a crabapple. This has nothing to do with sun, water, or soil. Every one of those can be flawless, and the tree still sits there covered in blossoms every spring, producing nothing, because there's no compatible pollen source anywhere nearby. Here's what makes this trap even sneakier. Some varieties do get marketed as self-pollinating, and a few genuinely are, but even the self-fertile ones typically set only 20 to 40% of what they'd produce with a proper pollinator nearby. Golden Delicious, Gala, Granny Smith, they can technically fruit alone, but the harvest is consistently light and disappointing next to what a second tree unlocks. One grower's Dwarf Golden Delicious produced just 12 apples across its first 2 years. Add a compatible Gala nearby and the harvest jumped to over 80 pounds by year 4. Same tree, same care, same pot. The only thing that changed was pollen access. The fix is easier than it sounds. You don't need 2 full trees eating up 2 pots. A multi-grafted tree, 2 or more compatible varieties on 1 trunk, solves this in a single container. For tight spaces, keeping compatible varieties within about 50 feet is enough for bees to move pollen between them. 2 dwarf varieties less than 20 feet apart is enough to reliably transfer pollen. On a patio, that's often just 2 pots instead of 1, not a second orchard. The payoff for getting this right is the biggest of the list so far. A properly pollinated dwarf apple given a couple years to establish turns from a handful of apples into a genuinely heavy annual harvest. The difference between a decorative tree and a real food source decided entirely by one detail most people never think to check. At 8, Bonanza dwarf peach. A grocery store peach is a gamble. Half the time it's mealy or picked so early it never actually ripens, just softens. A homegrown dwarf peach flips the problem entirely. The trick isn't getting it to fruit, it's understanding one rule that runs the exact opposite of grow it as a houseplant. Here's the trap people genuinely don't see coming. A peach tree needs to get cold on purpose. It requires accumulated chill hours below 45 degrees F each winter to bloom and fruit the following year. Kept warm and growing indoors year-round, it simply won't flower. That's not a minor detail. Someone protecting their container peach by keeping it cozy in the living room all winter, thinking they're doing it a favor, is actually guaranteeing it never blooms. One firm rule from the nursery world: never bring a dormant fruit tree into a heated house for winter. The warmth breaks dormancy early, the tree pushes new growth, and a normal spring cold snap shocks and damages it. The fix is simple once you know it. Let the container sit outside or in an unheated garage or shed through its natural winter chill, then bring it back to full sun in spring. Bonanza needs roughly 250 chill hours to break dormancy properly, comfortably achievable in most temperate zones without any special effort. It's simply however cold your winter naturally gets. Sizing is genuinely container-friendly here more than most trees on this list. Bonanza is a true genetic dwarf, topping out at 4 to 6 feet. You won't outgrow a 25-gallon container with this one, and it doesn't get taller with age the way a grafted dwarf on rootstock eventually can. Pollination's a non-issue. Bonanza is self-fertile, one tree full crop. One more thing worth flagging: peach blossoms are more cold-sensitive than apple blossoms. A late frost below 28 degrees F during full bloom can wipe out the entire year's crop. But on a container tree, the fix takes about 30 seconds. Drape it with a bedsheet overnight if frost is forecast during bloom. Get the winter chill and the spring frost timing right, and a single potted bonanza carries you through a summer of peaches that were never trucked in from anywhere, just picked, still warm from the sun, off your own patio. At 7, Negami kumquat. Nobody's had this at a grocery store because almost nobody knows what to do with it there. Here's the whole trick in one sentence. With a kumquat you eat the peel and skip the flesh's usual role. The peel is surprisingly sweet, the pulp underneath is tart and tangy, and you eat the entire thing, skin and all. It's the single most aha fruit on this list. The tree everyone photographs the first time they realize what's actually happening when they bite into one. Here's the trap that would otherwise scare people off. Most assume all citrus is fragile and demanding. Kumquats break that pattern entirely. They're the most cold-hardy citrus variety out there, surviving conditions as low as 20 degrees F, temperatures that would kill other citrus trees outright. That single trait makes this a realistic patio tree for climates where a Mayer lemon or standard orange simply wouldn't survive a bad winter night. Size is another point in its favor. While other citrus can grow 20+ feet, kumquats naturally max out around 4 to 6 feet while still producing heavy crops. One of the most genuinely compact fruit trees on this entire list, no aggressive pruning discipline required. Pollination's a complete non-issue. Every kumquat variety is self-pollinating. One tree, no partner, no hand pollination, no guesswork. The one real watch-out with this tree isn't temperature or sun, it's the pot itself. Container-grown kumquats can develop twig dieback and leaf loss if they become root-bound, so check on it periodically rather than plant and forget. When growth slows or the pot feels packed solid with roots, size up. Otherwise, 6 to 8 hours of full sun, a container at least 15 to 20 gallons with good drainage, and it's genuinely low maintenance. Harvest timing rounds out why this earns a spot. It flowers in summer and ripens in late winter, filling one of the few real gaps on this list when almost nothing else here is producing. While your other container trees sit dormant, this one's still handing you something to eat straight off the branch in the dead of winter. A fruit you genuinely cannot buy fresh most places at any price. At 6, Black Beauty elderberry. This one comes with a warning, and it's a real one, not a marketing gimmick. Raw elderberries and every other part of the plant, leaves, stems, bark, roots, contain compounds that can produce cyanide if consumed in quantity. That should get your attention. But here's the actual context: cooking the berries for at least 20 minutes fully breaks those compounds down. Once cooked, elderberries are completely safe and frankly one of the most nutritionally impressive berries you can grow, more vitamin C than oranges plus serious antioxidants. Never eat them raw off the bush. Always cook them into syrup, jam, or baking. That's the entire rule, non-negotiable. Here's the trap layered on top of that. Elderberry tags often say self-fruitful, and technically some fruit does form alone, but yields are significantly higher with cross-pollination. University guidance recommends at least 2 compatible cultivars within 60 feet of each other for the best fruit set. On a patio, that's 2 pots, not 1. Plan for it from the start, not after a disappointing first season. For sizing, elderberry is naturally a fast-spreading shrub, and containing it is actually one of the best reasons to grow it in a pot. It has shallow roots but spreads aggressively via suckers, so a container keeps that in check. A management upgrade. Same idea as the goji berry earlier on this list. A compact cultivar like Black Beauty stays around 6 feet, and pruning after the 3rd year keeps it short and bushy instead of sprawling. The payoff is substantial once you factor in what elderberry actually replaces, not a grocery item, but the immune support syrup people spend real money on every cold season. A mature, well-pollinated plant produces 2 to 3 pounds of fruit per season, enough for multiple batches of homemade syrup. The same stuff sold in small bottles at premium prices in health food stores, made instead from berries you grew, cooked properly, and turned into your own supply for the price of 2 plants and a pot of honey. At 5, compact Stella sweet cherry. Fresh sweet cherries at the grocery store are a luxury item, often $6 to $8 a pound, sold by weight because they're that expensive to produce and ship without bruising. This entry quietly targets one of the priciest fruits most people ever buy and pulls off something almost no other sweet cherry can. Here's the trap that sinks most people before they even plant. Sweet cherries are famous for needing a pollination partner, a second compatible variety blooming at the same time, or you get flowers and nothing else. Stella is one of the few genuinely self-fertile sweet cherries. Most others need a different variety blooming nearby to set fruit at all, but a single Stella produces a good crop entirely on its own. A rare exception in the sweet cherry world, and the entire reason this variety makes a patio list where most sweet cherries wouldn't belong. Worth knowing, Stella can even pollinate other self-sterile sweet cherries, though it's a well-documented exception that it doesn't reliably pollinate the popular Bing variety. Worth remembering if you're tempted to add a second cherry tree later. Sizing is where the fine print actually matters most. Stella's mature size depends almost entirely on the rootstock it's grafted onto, not the variety name. Nurseries tend to gloss over this, and it causes more disappointment than almost anything else on this list. Look specifically for compact Stella, a genuine semi-dwarf topping out around 10 to 12 feet. A standard rootstock version can reach 20 to 30 feet, a completely different commitment for a container. The wait is real but not unreasonable, usually 3 to 5 years from planting, sometimes a season or 2 sooner on dwarfing rootstock. Full sun, well-drained soil, and bird netting. When fruit ripens, birds love these cherries as much as you will. The payoff once it arrives is the fruit people specifically save up for at the store. Large, dark, split-resistant cherries, picked ripe off your own patio instead of a $7 a pound clamshell. At 4, Ruby Supreme Dwarf Guava. If you've never had a truly ripe guava, you've never actually had guava. The ones shipped to grocery stores are picked rock-hard and green weeks before the flavor develops because a ripe guava bruises if you look at it wrong. This tree solves that permanently, and it's one of the fastest fruiting entries on the entire list. Here's the trap most people don't expect. Forget everything you've heard about fruit trees taking years. Grown from seed, guava takes 3 to 8 years to bear, but a grafted nursery tree flips that entirely, often fruiting in its very first year. If a nursery sells you a seed-grown guava while implying quick fruit, that's the mismatch to watch for. Always confirm you're buying grafted, not a seedling. Pollination's a non-issue. Guavas are mostly self-fruitful, though some cultivars produce more with cross-pollination. 1 tree is genuinely enough. The real trap is sizing and pruning discipline. Standard guava cultivars can reach 12 feet or more, but a dedicated dwarf variety stays around 3 feet, and even a full-sized cultivar can be held at 6 to 10 feet with annual pruning. Pinching growing tips keeps it compact. Removing water sprouts and suckers is what actually controls the size, not the pot alone. Use a container at least 24 to 30 inches wide and 20 to 24 inches deep, well-draining soil, and feed it roughly every 6 to 8 weeks during the growing season. Container guavas deplete nutrients faster than garden-grown ones. The payoff is where this tree genuinely separates itself. In warm year-round locations, a mature guava can produce 2 harvests a year, a large crop in summer, a a smaller one in winter or spring, and yield 50 to 80 pounds annually. Not a once-a-year treat. A near-continuous supply of a fruit most people have only ever eaten underripe and flavorless from a store, sweet, aromatic, and genuinely unrecognizable, straight off your own patio. At 3. Arbequina olive. This is the tree that quietly upgrades your entire kitchen, not just your fruit bowl. Grocery store olive oil is often a blend of who knows what, pressed from who knows where. Extra virgin labeling has been scrutinized for years for exactly that reason. This tree lets you sidestep it entirely, press or cure your own from olives you watched grow. Here's the trap that surprises people first: you cannot eat a fresh olive off the tree. Arbequina has a light, fruity flavor, but freshly harvested fruit must be cured before eating and processed right away. Raw off the branch, it's bitter to the point of inedible, not a flaw. That's just how every olive on earth works. Nobody mentions it until you've already bitten into one expecting a mild snack. Trap number 2 lives indoors specifically. Arbequina is self-pollinating, but indoor conditions can hurt fruit set: no wind, no bees to move the pollen. When it blooms, gently shake the branches or dab pollen between flowers with a small paintbrush. Skip that step indoors and you'll get a beautiful flowering plant and disappointingly few olives. Sizing is genuinely favorable for containers. In a pot, Arbequina stays much smaller than its in-ground potential, usually 4 to 6 feet versus 15 to 20 feet unpruned in the ground. It's also one of the most cold-tolerant fruiting olive varieties out there, withstanding temperatures down to 5 degrees F once established, though container-grown trees should still come indoors before hard freezes. Bearing age is short too, typically 1 to 2 years after planting, and a mature tree can yield 20 or more pounds annually. The real payoff isn't grocery savings, it's the novelty. Curing your own table olives or pressing a small batch of genuinely homegrown extra virgin oil is the kind of thing almost nobody around you can actually do. A Mediterranean staple grown and processed entirely on your own patio. At 2. Dwarf Cavendish banana. Say grow your own banana tree in a container out loud and it sounds like a joke. It isn't. This is the exact Cavendish variety sold in every grocery store in the country, and yes, it fruits on a patio. Here's the correction that changes how you think about the whole plant. It's not actually a tree. Botanically, it's a giant herb with a layered pseudostem, no woody tissue at all, which explains why a hard frost can topple the leaves overnight, yet the underground rhizome often bounces right back once it warms up. Trap number 1, and it's a big one. Once a stalk finishes fruiting, cut it down to the ground. It will never produce fruit again. That single stalk is done permanently the moment it bears bananas once. The plant survives because it continuously sends up new mini-clones called pups. Let the strongest one take over, remove the weaker ones. Someone expecting one stalk to fruit forever has fundamentally misunderstood how this plant works. It's the single most common source of "my banana plant died" confusion online. Pollination's a genuine non-event. Dwarf Cavendish is fully self-pollinating. One plant, that's it. Sizing is where dwarf earns its name in a way most trees on this list can't match. It usually tops out around 6 to 8 feet outdoors, even less in a container. Genuinely small for something this tropical and dramatic. Use a 20 to 30 gallon pot for the long haul, full sun, consistent watering. The timeline requires patience, but it's foreseeable. Flowering and fruiting starts roughly 270 to 450 days after planting, with the fruit sizing up over another 3 to 7 months depending on warmth. A home bunch often weighs 15 to 30 pounds across multiple hands, dramatically more than anything else on this list produces in one harvest. Get through that first cycle, and you're not managing a tree anymore. You're managing an ongoing, self-renewing colony of pups that keeps handing you full grocery store-style banana bunches on a patio indefinitely. At 1. Australian finger lime. Everything else on this list has saved you money. This one's different. It's the single fruit here that home growers are actually selling. Cut one open and you don't get juice, you get hundreds of tiny, glistening lime-flavored pearls that spill out and pop on your tongue. That's why chefs nicknamed it citrus caviar. These fruits sell for over $100 a pound in specialty markets, and growers selling directly to restaurants regularly report $40 to $60 a pound. Compare that to $2 to $3 a pound for regular limes at wholesale, and you start to understand the cult following this fruit has built among home growers with a spare patio pot. Here's the trap: this is genuinely the trickiest tree on the whole list, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Finger limes are widely considered the most challenging citrus to grow. They only survive year-round in the ground in California, Arizona, South Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. Everywhere else, a container is your only option. That's not a downside, it's the whole point of this list. The plant wants partial shade and consistently moist soil, the opposite instinct of most sun-loving citrus, and the detail that trips up growers who assume citrus always means full sun and dry spells between waterings. Sizing is manageable. In a 5 to 15 gallon container, it stays a compact 5 to 7 feet. A starter tree only needs a 10 to 14 inch pot, roughly 3 to 5 gallons. Pollination's simple self-pollinating, one tree is enough, though a second nearby modestly improves the harvest. The payoff is unlike anything else on this list. Peak harvest runs November through December, often with production continuing year-round once the tree matures. A handful of pods from your own patio tree is, pound for pound, worth more than almost anything else you could grow, which is exactly why it's number 1. That's all 19. You don't need land, a greenhouse, or a green thumb passed down for generations to grow real food. You need the right variety, the right pot, and about 20 minutes of setup. If one of these caught your eye, start with a single pot this week. Don't buy 5 trees and get overwhelmed. 1 tree, 1 pot, 1 season, then you'll know exactly what to do with the next 19. Drop what you're growing or thinking about growing in the comments. I read every one. I want to know which of these you're starting with.